let's go back to a time uh, when California was still occupied by absolute insane people. They had the highest positions of power, except people actually liked them.
Alright.
Let me introduce you to the story of Emperor Norton, unless you've already heard of this one too.
I don't think I've ever heard this one.
So, a wealthy immigrant from South Africa, a famous African American, a true, rags to riches story. Actually, it's the opposite, riches to rags. Because, just to sum it up, he buys too much rice and goes bankrupt.
What?
It's a very strong oversimplification, but he literally bought too much rice. And he became homeless, going around on the streets. Until one day, he's fed up with everything, declares himself Emperor of the United States. And he sends this declaration of his to the San Francisco newspapers. And they find it so funny that they publish it. And now the whole town knows about this guy who just declared himself emperor. And they go along with it. He gets a beaver hat with a giant peacock feather, becomes a local celebrity. People bow to him when they walk by him on the street. He gets free public transport. They give him quote-unquote taxes, which is just homeless support, essentially.
Alright.
He makes an order abolishing the Congress in Washington, D.C. They fail to listen to him, unfortunately.
Yeah.
He tries to get both the Protestants and the Catholics to crown him emperor. Unfortunately, they ghosted him as well. But in San Francisco, this man is a complete celebrity. He introduces his own currency. I've heard them called Norton bucks or whatever. I doubt they were called that back in the day.
Norton VPN?
He made his own currency. A lot of shops actually used it. Certain restaurants he would give his approval to, and they'd put it at the window. It's like emperor approved dining, and more people would sit there. The toy shops in San Francisco started selling Emperor Norton action figures and dolls.
When was this?
This is in like the 19th century, so the 1800s. Yeah, like mid 1800s, when all this crazy stuff was going down. At one point, a police officer says, "Guys, this man is clearly insane. We shouldn't be propping him up." And he arrests Emperor Norton. And the Californian public absolutely freaks out. Alright, there are riots in the streets. This is, what's it called?
It's madness.
Mutiny. It was a mutiny. He had just overthrown the Empire of the United States.
Yeah.
So the police eventually give in to the public, release Emperor Norton, and then Norton turns to the cop that arrested him and gave him a royal pardon.
Okay.
And now, after this incident, every cop saluted him as they saw him.
Ridiculous. And when did this man die?
We'll get to that. Also, after he lived, I assume, in the 18-somethings. He theorized the League of Nations way before it came into being.
Yeah.
So he could have solved World War I, honestly. There's a story where he goes up to an anti-Chinese mob and starts praying and telling people to knock off, and he ends racism. Unfortunately, you know,
We
the
need another
Democrat
Emperor
Party
Norton.
still existed. According to some YouTube comments, he had a feud with the guy he thought was George Washington. George Washington was dead long before Norton was born, by the way.
Yeah, the dude died in like 1799.
Yeah.
The heck?
When Mexico was invaded by the French, in addition to being Emperor of the United States, he also dubbed himself the Lord Protector of Mexico, because no one else was protecting Mexico, so he took the honor upon himself. Such a noble, good leader of the people. Mexico was not protected. He sent a bunch of letters to Queen Victoria in England, trying to get her to marry him to solve world peace or something.
Man, this dude, he was truly something.
Truly. Here's the King of Hawaii, back when it was still a tribal people, refused to recognize the Congress in Washington. Instead recognized Emperor Norton, which he was actually recognized by other world powers. He's a legitimate leader. What a good...
This is ridiculous.
I know. Unfortunately, he continued to live in poverty. One day, collapsed on a street corner. And for his funeral, because he died, the public of San Francisco, from all classes, all races, attended his funeral. A lot of people. And he lives today as a legend in San Francisco, and also apparently a patron in some weird religion that I didn't do any research in. That's the story of Emperor Norton.
Interesting.
America's only true leader.